A sexual crush.
SARS. I think I love SARS.
I'll say Obonjaya.
I think I'm obsessed with. Actually, no, yeah, for sure, SARS.
Yes, Obonjaya. Why wouldn't you pick Obonjaya?
I think the last one I had was, I'm a bit embarrassed to say. God. I used to have a crush on like Nelly. Nelly the rapper. But I was, to be fair, I was like, 17.
Daniel Kaluuya. See how that was top of mind.
Amari.
Then yeah, he used to, he had that swag and whatever. Now I'm like, oh my God, no thanks. Even F-boy.
The person that acted as the wife in Creed 3.
Tessa Thompson?
Tessa Thompson, yes.
Did I ever get the talk, and if so, how old was I?
Talk, what talk?
I had the talk with myself.
My parents would say yes. I would say no. I didn't get any talk. The only talk I had was don't talk to boys. And I don't know about that being the talk. So yeah, I didn't have any talk at any age.
I didn't get the talk. How many of us got the talk? I think the only talk I got, nah, there was no talk.
I remember having one conversation with my mum and my siblings. She sort of sat us down and, she spoke about masturbation, but it was more so, like I said, your brothers are allowed to masturbate, they're boys. But that was it. There was no conversation about me or who cares about you, you just abstain. But yeah, so no, I never ever got a talk, never, yeah.
What was that? What was sex ed?
Sex ed. There was no sex ed in school. No.
Was there sex education in school? I mean, aside the integrated science reproduction classes, where they draw like the penis and the vulva, there was barely any sexual education. It was more reproduction based.
It was non-existent. It was, if you touch a boy, you would get pregnant. It was, if you walk with a boy, you're most likely going to get pregnant.
There was this movie they showed us called The Silent Scream, where it was basically an abortion video and how you should not abort children. So we didn't have any understanding of what was happening in our bodies. No one told us what not to do, how to be, what is right. It was just, don't get an abortion. That was literally the only video. And they literally showed us a very traumatic video of a baby being pulled out of its mother's womb, and they paused at the point where the baby screamed, and it's like the silent scream, and it's like, and we were like 12, 13 when we saw this. So yeah, if I say the school now, they'll say I'm somehow. Shout out to Lagoon. That's what Lagoon did to many of us.
Primary source of information when it came to learning about sex was probably just my friends. Because sex ed wasn't something that we were taught in secondary school at all. I think I learned it in primary school, like we had one lesson, but it was my friends.
I guess it would have been my friends and whatever information was coming through BBM and messengers and that kind of pop-ups at that time.
I'll say social media, the internet.
Twitter, the internet.
And I would say closer to 15, 16, there was the internet.
The internet generally, just like social media, porn.
I would say books, Harley Quinn novels, Meals and Boon.
I don't know if you guys know the Kama Sutra. I bought it at 15.
I remember there was this like informative cube thing that was passed around in my class. I was in like year 9, I think, just 3. And it was being passed around, and there was like a form of a man and a form of a woman in like the act of sex, and it was like, that was like the light bulb moment. I was like, oh, okay.
So I think it boils down to cultural and religious factors. I think a lot of Nigerians are very religious, and our culture really has placed and made sex look like a taboo. So teaching children about it or teaching young women about it is not a norm and not a practice for us because we feel like, most Nigerians feel like it will lead to corruption. Also, education has a role to play because a lot of Nigerians are not properly educated. They don't understand that, we don't understand that there are levels to sex education. There are things you tell children and young women and women at every point in time about sex education. So I think that proper education and destigmatizing sex as an entity would help Nigerians accept sex education as a thing and not think that it will corrupt people.
In school, I don't know what school could have done because knowing culturally, knowing the kind of people we are, I don't really know what school could have done. All the things I want to say, they would have just messed it up anyway.
What do I wish I was taught?
The sex is not a shameful act. And also, I mean, they keep talking about sex before marriage. You shouldn't have sex before marriage. I mean, fair enough if that's your STIs, but that's not for everybody. Not everybody's religious, you know? So I think we should kind of, I think eliminating the shame around sex and letting us know that sex is actually a pleasurable act and it's nothing to be ashamed about.
Because I'm very inquisitive and I search for knowledge a lot, I'm not necessarily sure I would say, oh, I wish they told me XYZ in school. I think I found most of the information that I needed by myself.
I think I would have wanted to be taught everything, like from the basics, because I wasn't taught any at all from home. My parents are pastors, so I didn't get any of the sex talk.
I guess I wish I was taught more about knowing what my boundaries or setting my own boundaries and also respecting other people's boundaries too. I don't think I recognized a lot of that for a very long time.
I wish generally we just taught things about like consent, making the right decisions, how to choose like the people you interact with sexually, how to look after yourself, and kind of also just how much sex can affect your mental health as well, and how to make sure that you look out for yourself when you're doing anything that's like related to sex.
It's unfortunate because when you don't have knowledge, you are disadvantaged and you're made vulnerable. So a lot of women don't know about their sexual rights, they don't know about their reproductive health, so they're forced and made to not live their best quality of lives. They're not aware of the options they have, reproductively speaking. They're not aware of the rights they have, and so it's used against a lot of women.
Parents, teachers.
I think the primary caregiver is one of the most important spaces that should be a source of sex education. It's just unfortunate that in Nigeria you have even parents who don't have adequate sex education.
Initially, it's the primary caregiver, whoever your primary caregiver is, introduce them to sex in a healthy way.
For me as a parent, I'm already thinking of how those initial conversations always be having my kids.
Schools as well, but there's this ongoing debate about, should the schools be responsible? But there's age-appropriate sex education, and when people are trying to give age-appropriate sex education, obviously, you have a kid and you're teaching your child how to name body parts, you're teaching them good touch, bad touch, consent. As you're going older, you're teaching them about changes in their body and stuff. So when things happen outside that are not good, they can also run to their primary caregivers. But then you also want schools to also have that space where maybe there's a counselor, or maybe there's, there's just somebody who they can actually speak to about, all of this stuff. But I think it should be inserted in the curriculum as well.
And it also is very important to name biological parts as biological parts. Be very plain as possible. There's no need to be vague about something that can be traumatizing to people that don't have the language for it. But when you teach children, when you teach adults, even the language to name experiences, to name parts of their body, to name all of these things and give them as expansive a library as possible, then they'll be able to contextualize what sex means to them and build a healthy relationship to it.
I think I would say society as a whole, of young people themselves as well. Like with me, I had to go out and seek the information myself because it wasn't readily available. But I also think society, because society is so good at telling us, do this and don't do this and do that. So it's your responsibility to create a a healthy sex education for young people and adolescents.
Growing up, like obviously because you're kind of adolescent, between your adolescent and teenagers, when something is treated as like this perverse topic or everyone is so anti the thing, you kind of want to go and do it and you're curious about it. And the thing is, when you do it without any guidance, many times you're going to make mistakes.
When people are not allowed to talk about sex freely, and people that are educated about it cannot freely educate because of the stigma surrounding sex, things like what happened to me when I was in secondary school, my junior secondary school would happen. Girls, women will start to get information from places that they shouldn't. I was told when I was like 10, that when I started getting my period, that if I'm on my period and I touch a boy, I'll become pregnant. So things like that happen because there's not enough sex education.
Just talk about it. It's sex, you didn't kill someone.
Number one thing is speaking, awareness, sexual education as well, and sexual education at home, but also in schools and in peer spaces when we can have these conversations. Same way we're talking about food, or we're talking about, partying or traveling or any other biological function, then I think that's the way to go to normalize these things.
Embracing sex as something that happens, that is biological and emotional and social, and embracing it as like a human condition, as something that is as basic as food, clothing, and shelter, but also considering communities like the asexual communities and learning what the asexual community has to say about sex, learning what people outside the heteronormative umbrella has to say about sex.